Hello everyone and welcome back. Firstly, I want to say thank you all for enjoying my Elder Scrolls videos and to assure you that those are still coming as per the usual. For today, I would like to share with you a small indie game that I experienced 12 or so years ago called Contrast. Xbox Live used to release a free game every month for those with a gold membership or higher. During that time, I downloaded a range of things from Volgar the Viking to Rayman, but somewhere in the mix I saw this, a game called Contrast. From the title and imagery alone, I was really unsure about it. Would I wait out the grueling day-long download speeds of my college dorm just to give it a shot? Well, I did, and having replayed it recently for this video, I really gathered a deeper appreciation for what the team set out to complete. This team is called Compulsion Games. Founded in Montreal, Canada, the studio aimed to make games of a smaller, more story-driven style. This led to our focus of the video, Contrast. We'll be discussing the story elements and all in detail, so fair warning that there will be spoilers. If you'd like to pick up the game before watching the analysis, it's easily accessible on nearly every platform, usually for around $10. With all that said, let's dig in. Contrast, at its core, is a story about a broken family and the poor young girl who's stuck in the middle of it all. Dee Dee wants desperately to pull her parents back together, taking on a role that is neither deserved nor expected of her. Regardless of this, every act she takes in the story is to fix one of their mistakes, namely her father's. This is a massive endeavor for a child, and one in which she needs help. In comes Dawn, the playable character. She's understood by those in the story as Dee Dee's imaginary friend, one that is never physically seen or interacted with. The depths of these beliefs we will dive into later, but here it's clear to see that Dee Dee recognizes Dawn's presence physically. The story begins in Dee Dee's room up in the attic of a 1920s English townhouse. Just from the scenery alone we can gather quite a bit. The dilapidated walls, the bare wooden supports, and the patched up blankets on the bed all hint at a lack of wealth and stability. All around the room are posters, hints of aspiration for Dee Dee to follow as she lives out a relatively boring and difficult childhood. Many of them depict characters performing or flying, which may connect to her wish to escape from all the stress placed upon her. Above her bed are stars, probably cut out of wood by one of her parents, if not both when they were together. On the floor near the bedroom door is a suitcase, perhaps hinting at their consistent need to move from place to place as money dries up. In the corner of the room, Dee Dee's hung up a bunch of drawings. The most important one contains a drawing of Dee Dee, her parents, Kat and Johnny, and also Dawn, curiously misspelled in this one compared to drawings you see later on. Then again, it says she was 6 when she drew it. Further drawings depict animals like Harold the cat and a fish underwater. I would love to find out that a child of a developer drew this, or better yet, that a developer themselves did. Also drawn is Dee Dee's escape plan, a heavy foreshadowing element. When she drew it is uncertain, but it's sitting right beside the only light source in the room, which would make it clearly evident to her mother if she was ever around. Then again, she does have to work late nights in order to provide. Another foreshadowing of Dee Dee's escape plans is the stack of books leading toward the windowsill, upon which sits a small lamp. These books, as well as those on the shelf to the left, show that Dee Dee is indeed well read, something that'll come up later in the ways she expresses herself. As a final note of the room composition, there's a coat rack with a hat on it. These clothes are clearly too large for Dee Dee, and I assume they must be those of her dad, something she keeps around even though he's not here. A gramophone in the corner plays a record of Kat's cabaret music, something to also keep Dee Dee company when she's home alone. All of these details really lean in to show that her mother does her best to make Dee Dee feel comforted and, at the very least, remove some loneliness. As Dawn turns on the lamp in the corner, Dee Dee runs in and hops on the bed. She grabs a framed photo of her father from the floor and kisses it goodnight, setting up for the fact that he is no longer around. She then notices Dawn and tells her to hide before her mother comes in to set her to bed. Kat comes in, tells Dee Dee goodnight, and clearly doesn't even notice Dawn. It's here that the player first realizes that they're invisible to others, and that they can only see the shadows of those in the quote-unquote real world. Dee Dee asks if her father will ever come back, a difficult question for Kat to answer. After she leaves, Dee Dee lies and says she'll go to sleep. Her mother goes out to work at the cabaret, where she performs in order to make money. After this, Dee Dee resolves to go see her mom perform for the first time, following her own intensely detailed escape schematics. She crawls up to the window, prepared to use her sheet rope to descend onto an ash cart, but it's been moved. This is the first time that Dawn aids Dee Dee during our experience, but it shows that they've been working together like this for some time, as Dee Dee is fairly experienced with how this should go. Still, Dee Dee is pretty direct with how to proceed, which is only necessary as this comprises the tutorial. Here we also see just how important Dee Dee's lantern is to the story. Without her guiding light, Dawn couldn't traverse the spaces as easily as she does. Using the projected shadows of the clothesline, Dawn runs through the 2D plane in order to reach a distant fire escape. This is just as broken down as the windows and walls of the alley, another clear hint at how the families in this area are lower class, or even in direct poverty. Dawn, very strong, pushes the ash cart back into place below the sheet rope. Dee Dee poses the question of who moved it. Was it her mother trying to prevent her from sneaking out again? I think we will answer this question later, as it dawned on me, get it, dawned, that it was in fact not Kat, but someone of a more nefarious persuasion. Dee Dee joins Dawn on the ground level and uses this time to be upset at her. Apparently Dawn had been away on some personal business. This unaccounted for period of time is never explained to the player, so its relevance is questionable. This does stand to show that Dawn never speaks, something that I believe somewhat harms the story, as she never consoles or even vocally communicates to Dee Dee once. Still, she does help her with each goal and manages to read Dee Dee loud and clear. The fact that Dee Dee leads you, an adult, through the night streets is another important detail. She's incredibly independent, something that has been forced upon her by the events of her childhood. She's completely unafraid, wandering the streets at night with goals in mind. The duo soon come to a set of pipes in an alleyway. Dee Dee says Dawn cannot fit and must find another way through. However, it's a bit too obvious of a go-that-way game mechanic, as Dawn can clearly fit through here. Regardless of her thin frame, she's also an acrobat, so she should easily be able to make it through. I digress. She knocks over someone's belongings so that you can climb the shadows to a balcony. From here, you two are separated and must reach the ghost note, the cabaret, by your own means. This also serves as the introduction to luminaries, a collectible object which reflects the light and dark themes of the game. These luminaries do come into play as a form of progression barrier. However, they're listed in a collectible sense, noting the number you currently have. This is a little strange as it's not necessary to collect all of them and you only need 3 per act to move forward. In the streets below, there are posters of Kat, Dee Dee's mom. This is our first and nearly only look at her within the story. Her last name on the poster, Knight, is just a pseudonym, as we will soon learn the family name is Malankaya. The streets offer many cool ways in which Dawn can use the shadows to her advantage. Here she rides the somehow perpetually moving bike pedals to her advantage, climbing up to another balcony to reach a luminary. Some may note the lack of people in the area, which is somewhat explained by the late hour of the night. However, many of them are also in the shops and theaters downtown, which we will soon see. All around the ghost note, which is named after a musical note with rhythm but no defined pitch, are clubs with dancers. Funnily enough, you can get an achievement by trying to enter one of the doors. These peaches are aptly placed, let's just say. Also, dang, 25 cents? Where's a time machine? Another example of the poverty in this town is the placement of a pawn and loan shop right across from the bars and clubs, called the Gold Mine. It's really just a gold mine for those preying upon the people who live here, which may also include Dee Dee's father Johnny, a man who's known for having monetary issues. Across from the gold mine is the ghost note itself, a beautiful club with doors flanked by large cat-like animals. The pictures above the signage are indicative of the vaudevillian era in which this takes place. Before we move into the next wing of the story, however, there's something else we should look at, other than this jump scare painted on the wall. At the far end of the street is a floating gramophone. This represents the gramophone from Dee Dee's room, the one which plays her mother's voice. When Dawn nears it, a shadow mystically appears on the wall. It's a shadow of a memory from earlier in the mission, where Dee Dee's mother is putting her to bed. It can be used to gather a luminary, but also calls to question the limits of Dawn's shadow-traversing powers. Is she able to imprint memories onto the 2D plane in order to use them as terrain? Is it something she's in control of, or does it happen either way? If there's any way to show that Dawn cares and is retaining any of what is going on in Dee Dee's life, other than consistently helping her family, this is probably it. A little further down the street, we're met with a surprise. The road breaks, twisting into itself, and the void. Chairs, restaurant signs, and more all float in the air, unbound by reality. Does this show the severity of Dawn's predicament as a shadow person? Or does it hint at something more, a mortal connection that is consistently trying to connect threads that are an arm's length apart? Returning to the ghost note, Dawn and Dee Dee enter to find the place full. Well, relatively. See, the building is actually quite packed and the background chatter alludes to this. But what does it even better are the smoking cigarettes and ashtrays throughout the cabaret. But again, Dawn cannot see the people physically. Why then, you may ask, is Dawn able to see Dee Dee so vividly? This will be answered by the end of the story. For now, Kat needs these lights turned on so that people can watch her act, and for whatever reason, only Dawn will do it. What's cool about this scene is that it fills us in on how Dee Dee sees the situation, sneaking out from home to see what her mom's nightlife is like. Also, Dawn gets to help Dee Dee and further interact with shadows, jumping across the shades of either musician in order to reach the final broken spotlight. On the way, Dawn finds paperwork sent to Kat by social workers. They suggest that Dee Dee is mentally unwell due to her insistence on the presence of Dawn, her imaginary friend. They also threaten to take her away and insult her career choice as an act of irresponsibility. This adds to the stress of the situation, and its placement here also shows that Kat had to have read this letter right before starting her act for the night. This is the 1920s equivalent of getting a "we need to talk" text right before starting your shift. It doesn't make for a good time. When the final light shines upon the stage, we watch the shadows of Kat and her band performing a jazzy tune. Just before it's shortly interrupted by the presence of a man in a hat. Now, in terms of game design, it makes sense to highlight their silhouettes, as this is the primary form in which we learn to recognize their characters. In reality though, the shadows would be much smaller and less defined, as the spotlight is decently far away from the stage. This is one of many compromises the developers had to make in order to complete the project. Honestly, it doesn't bother me one bit, I just thought I'd mention it for clarity's sake, even though she didn't ask for it. This is where we fight the first boss of the game, Kat, Destroyer of Egos. Actually, we find Dee Dee listening in to the first visual meeting of her parents. They start an argument in which Kat tells Johnny he isn't welcome around her. She's fed up with his schemes, which tend to land him in deep water. His immature response is to show off his suit as a beacon of his monetary security, one that Kat cannot believe in. Turns out Johnny is well known in town for being a schemer, messing things up, and being a general failure. Kat turns to leave and get back to singing, while Johnny, still aggressive in his goal to get back to her, shouts after her to say that he's staying at an expensive hotel. This serves to show that Johnny is indeed up to another scheme, to tell the player where they will eventually need to go, and to highlight Johnny's immature nature. It adds to a pre-existing history we didn't witness, but now have some evidence to believe. Unfortunately, some of the dialogue is a little too on the nose, a problem that exists in a few scenes. Here, Johnny says, "I never wanted to leave, you kicked me out," as if this is not already understood between them. It comes off more as exposition than a natural discussion between two separated partners. Also, the use of Kiddo in their dialogue shows even more immaturity on his part, as well as an infantilization of Kat when she's the one working to care for Dee Dee. The irony here could not be more explicit. Also, the song Kat sings, called House on Fire, is not proven to be exactly about her relationship with Johnny, but it's reasonable to suggest that it's at very least heavily inspired by it. At this point, we now know that Johnny makes bad monetary decisions, leading to Kat's distrust and his removal from the house. As he leaves, Dee Dee resolves to follow. Dawn, of course, goes with her to help in whatever may come. Up next, we head to the bar that Dee Dee's dad frequents. This is where a lot of his trouble seems to brew, as we will see in a moment. But not before we learn that Dawn can slam through barriers somehow with her dash ability. To be honest, it seems a little out of place. I think the developers just wanted there to be a little more interaction between the player and the environment, other than just jumping, moving objects, and traversing shadows. In the bar, we see Dee Dee's dad talking to the amazing Vincenzo, a famous magician in the area. He's asking for a film reel to show his clients, something to prove to them that this deal is real this time. Vincenzo offers up its location, saying it's locked upstairs. This is another example of dialogue that's clearly for the player and not for the story. There are ways to make this more seamless. For example, he could just say it's locked away. Also, why does his manager have an office in a local bar? Is he also the bar owner? This is never expanded upon, but it's interesting to think about. It's not unheard of for people to own multiple businesses, so I guess it could be a thing. Johnny continues with his request, noting that he's aware of his own debts, as well as those of Mr. Vincenzo. The source of these are unclear, save for Johnny's, which are obviously resultant of his false promises and failures to deliver. Here we learn that he's starting up a circus to make money back for whatever his last scam was. He even made a poster up, which could also be a lie, perhaps something that was made for him. Either way, as Vincenzo leaves, he requests cash in return for his lending of the film reel. Here we have a small break as Dawn plans to retrieve it. All around the bar are fitting posters, wine glasses, green lamps, and plush chairs to rest in. Dawn takes the liberty of moving around the light box, using the shadows to travel to the upper section of the building. Here we see a pool table that's really unfair for whoever is playing solids. Outside we use a clever shadow to get across to a luminary. This makes me wonder whether the luminaries are beacons to Dawn in order to draw her to the correct locations, or if they're just manifestations of energy surrounding this busy town. This is a bit random, but I gotta say, I love these Art Deco lamps. They remind me of scenes in old TV shows where the characters are studying late at the library, coming to their epiphanies by way of the lime-colored light. Dawn takes the film reel and brings it to Dee Dee. That way it can get to Johnny and help improve himself to the investors. However, I can't help but think this will lead to more distrust as Vincenzo eventually learns it was stolen, and possibly by Johnny or someone he put up to the act. Also, didn't Vincenzo say it was locked away? The door was wide open and the film reel was right there on the desk. Perhaps we can assume the manager came out to see who moved the light box out of place. As we continue to the theater, Dee Dee makes fun of Vincenzo.
Mr. Fenris, I have performed for the King of the Universe. There are monkeys who know about the amazing Vincenzo. If your investors haven't heard about me, they're stupid.
This next part confuses me a bit. As we saw before, the world is all twisted up, some parts deteriorating and fading into space itself. Objects float, just like Dawn apparently, and large objects form obstacles for the duo. Dee Dee can see all this. She also references luminaries, suggesting she's known about them the entire time. This calls even more question as to what the luminaries are or what their significance is. If we want to get a little more out there, we can continue with the theory of these luminaries being manifestations of energy, brought about by a predetermined timeline or something. Sort of like Donnie Darko, if you've ever seen that. Straying from the path a bit, we'll find another chance to get a luminary, over here based upon another memory we've gained. Following the ghostly voice of Kat, we jump across her performing shadow to reach our quarry. Once we have enough luminaries to power this beacon, Dee Dee lights it up and follows us, literally creating our path. Here's another thing that creates a question about Dawn being Dee Dee's imaginary friend. Both of them can apparently see all the devastation around them, but it all seems to center around Dee Dee's troubled life. This giant sign, for instance, has inexplicably fallen and created a bridge between the remnant of the previous street and the front of the theater. And what's on the broken sign? Two images. One shows Dee Dee's mother Kat performing at the cabaret. The other shows Vincenzo. This at first seems like coincidence. However, knowing what the rest of the story has to offer, it's actually very clever foreshadowing. Dawn traverses Dee Dee's thoughts as the young girl is shining a light on her own life, slowly piecing together her unknown history, figuring out just what went wrong to lead up to now. This is all I can say without spoiling the end, but I promise we'll get there. As we near the ticket booth, we see that the establishment has been purchased by someone recently, and that it's currently closed down. Dee Dee says it's locked, but then breaks into it somehow. It's unclear whether she picked the lock or messed with the door in some other way. Anyhow, it's open and the two are able to get inside. Dee Dee sneaks into the primary viewing room while Dawn rearranges some cardboard displays in order to follow. I really enjoy how each object used in the transformation of shadows is something that would realistically be there. Not every one is just a giant box or something. I think if they had done that, the world would really fall flat. Inside the theater is a pink bar of soap with Jack written on it. This is either a Fight Club reference or some in-house joke. Either way, it's pretty random. Johnny meets Dee Dee, and the two try to make sense of his absence. In this scene, I get the vibe that Johnny really does care about her. He knows he's messed up and admits it to Dee Dee. Suddenly, we hear doors clamoring in the adjacent room. Johnny quickly changes pace, coming up with a white lie to get Dee Dee to run out of there. She doesn't run all the way out, however, and what we see next is quite distressing. Two gangsters come in to see him, threatening to harm him if he doesn't pay them back. These are the people Johnny's in deep with, and it's implied that there are more of them in the gang. He invited them here to see the film, which he currently believes he doesn't have. He asked for more money so that he can get the reel from Vincenzo. He could lie and use it for other things, but seeing how he's been working so far, I believe it to be an honest goal. The gangsters, unfortunately but predictably, get angry with him. They beat him up while Dawn spends her sweet time getting the film reel to the projector. There are a couple things to note here. During the beatdown, Johnny's finger gets broken. Then the gangsters who did it offer to fix it. It's a real mind game with these people. This offer only comes after the reel is on display. Vincenzo shows up as a shadow, meaning that Dawn cannot see physical people other than Dee Dee, even within film reel. He walks about the stage, and we see no other shadows affecting his performance. The gangsters are convinced that he's a good performer anyway. This is a little confusing because seeing someone walk across the stage would not prove anything to me. This was probably just a hardware/voice acting pay limitation, something like that. The gangsters take Johnny out of the theater, which is owned presumably by the gang itself. We also don't know how Johnny was able to enter. Maybe an unnamed member let him in, then locked the doors to keep out unwanted passersby. Now the danger is a little more real. The two gangsters say they're going to follow Johnny to go see his wife Kat, bringing collateral damage into play. Next, we head to the Excelsior Hotel, the one Johnny's been staying at and bragging about to make himself seem more legitimate to his, the business partners. In the lobby, we find the two goons from before discussing their apparent meeting with Kat. They must have had their discussion up in room 529, which happens to also be our destination. Dee Dee has managed to find her way up top, but is stuck behind a door. It's not entirely clear to me as to why, but she then decides to throw the fire alarm, scaring everyone into running out of the hotel. This conveniently sets up a backsplash of bright shadows across the wall, allowing Dawn to make her way up without using the broken or otherwise unusable elevator. I guarantee I'm doing this part wrong, but oh well, I made it through. Dawn traverses the maintenance walkways to the outside of the hotel, where Kat has a large ad plastered across the wall. These walkways must have been used to paint the feature. Also, I would call them an OSHA violation, but OSHA wasn't created until April 8th of 1971, around 50 years beyond the time of this game. So, darn. Also, for an up-and-coming star, it's a little wild that her ads are all over town, with nary a competitor. Even worse, Johnny must have been staring out the balcony at this ad every night he slept here, a constant reminder of what he's working to save. Back to the story, Kat is smoking a cigarette out of stress, rearranging what I thought was a frying pan into a useful platform. Dawn glides over the two as they start to argue. We get a few more examples of Johnny's failed schemes and his gullibility. Kat's had enough, and turns to aim a gun on him. This is really unexpected, but leads to some of the most memorable dialogue in the game.
Oh, Johnny. Not again. You're a carousel of broken dreams. You keep coming around and around.
No one is ever gonna love you like I do, kiddo.
Get back! Don't try and kiss me, Johnny. I'll lose my mind.
You gonna shoot me? Go ahead and shoot. I got 2 holes in me where you and Dee Dee used to be. Put another one in there. Finish me off.
What do you want with Dee Dee? You're not even her real father.
What, you think Vincenzo's real? All he ever gave Dee Dee was her cute little nose. Yeah, maybe I'm not her real father, but I'm the one that showed her how to tie her shoes. I'm the one that put her to bed when you had to stay out late. You took her to see his show. Did he change his mind? He doesn't want to be her father. He doesn't want to be anybody's.
I hate you.
Jesus, Kat, what are you doing? Oh, well, that hurts.
No, don't die, Johnny.
Take care of Dee Dee, okay? Tell her that I love her.
Please don't leave me.
Tell her whatever she needs to hear.
If you wait out this thing long enough instead of continuing the mission, there's somewhat of an alternate ending / failed scene where Kat actually pulls the trigger on Johnny. The first time this happened, I really thought it was part of the story. That would have really sucked. What really happens is Dee Dee runs in as soon as Kat threatens herself. We also find out that Vincenzo is Dee Dee's real father, which lays a bitter note over her parents' reunion. Between Dee Dee's realization and now, there was a small time skip where Dawn apparently spent a while running errands. Dee Dee tells us that her father's circus is finally in town, and since Vincenzo will be there, and he's her real father, we need to go visit him. Here's another sign of the broken family. Dee Dee explains this beautiful picture of the couple is only hung when Johnny is around again, and taken down when he's not. It highlights the pain Kat feels when needing to push him away, which, for many reasons, can be understandable. Moving downstairs, we come across 2 really unfortunate items. One is an eviction notice, giving Kat a time limit to move out, no questions asked. The other is a hastily written plea to Child Services by Kat, asking them not to take Dee Dee away. She writes that Dee Dee is not crazy, that plenty of children have imaginary friends. She also tattles on herself a bit for being out late for work. Not able to afford more paper, she simply crosses out the lines she doesn't want them to read, showing a little naivete on her part as well, no doubt stemming from the stress. Dee Dee plays hopscotch on bricks that descend into the void. It's another question on whether Dee Dee can actually see all of this, or only bits and pieces. I have theories that we'll discuss in the end, which I think most can agree with. Eventually Dawn and Dee Dee happen upon the circus. It's actually real, and rather large at that. Johnny's been hard at work, which can also be seen as he speaks with Vincenzo on the stage. The magician throws a little tantrum about the quality of the circus, saying he won't perform unless it's fixed. So, Dee Dee, again, takes it upon herself to fix her father's mistakes, doing all that a child can do. The circus tent may seem small, but compared to the layout of the area, it does take up some real estate. This is something that costs a lot of money and time to make happen, so it does lend some credence to Johnny's claims about trying. I also want to take a moment to point something out here. Behind the circus is a photograph of Dee Dee and Kat. Johnny must have been looking at it behind the scenes. At first, it's sad as we know Johnny really wants them back. After this, it becomes really unsettling. So we know that Kat closed the window and tried to lock it so Dee Dee couldn't escape at night. That comes straight from the CPS paper we read before. But remember when Dee Dee asked who moved the ash cart? Look at the writing on this picture. We're counting on you, Johnny. Love, Sal. Despite the probably intentional misspelling of his name, As he misremembered one of theirs in the theater, this photo is actually menacing. Sal is one of the goons that Johnny owes. This angle couldn't be from anywhere but outside the window. My assumption is that the goons moved the ash cart in order to climb up and take a picture of them, giving Johnny a reminder that they know where his family lives. I initially thought this wasn't possible with the technology of the time, but then I did some research and yeah, there were personal cameras in the 20s. So it's possible the gang could both afford it and use it to take this picture. Another possibility is that Johnny himself took the image, but that's a little too creepy to believe. Either way, this is a subtle thing that really adds further stakes to the story. Moving on, we explore the grounds within the circus. Dawn comes across Dee Dee, who points out the stuck air balloon. Luckily, there's a carousel just below the balloon. While Dee Dee takes some much needed playtime, Dawn works her way up the shadows in order to reach the stuck attraction. This part's really cool. Dee Dee finds a stick of some sort and uses it to help Dawn cross to the other side. This shows again just how much time they've spent together and how smart Dee Dee has come to be. These stars and crescent moons are pretty cool visually, but a little annoying to traverse. I almost failed multiple times just trying to get through to the other side. I took a trip on my favorite rocket ship to the next segment and eventually found my way to the very top. There's a very nice patio area up here and a random bottle of wine that doesn't do anything when you activate it. I tried to see if it was an achievement, a collectible, etc., but nothing changes. Odd. Finally, Dawn releases the balloon and Dee Dee reels it in. She must be strong for a kid. Those winches can be tough for adults sometimes. Before fixing the next attraction, Dawn takes some me time to explore the carnival. First, she sees a classic duck shooting gallery, with only some ducks having targets on them. Next is a platform for the strongest man alive. This costs a fifth of the duck shooting range. I guess you get what you pay for. And that 1,000-pound dumbbell is probably made of styrofoam or something. Speaking of cost, how does Johnny hope to recoup $20,000 with these prices? How did his debt get so high? Flying pigs, huh? I'll believe it when I see it. Popcorn. Someone needs to stop this thing, it's wasting precious gold. I can't even get my microwave to pop a full bag and this is over 100 years later. What gives? The high dive looks really sketchy. I agree with Vincenzo on this one. Also, this clown is overlooking the memory of Johnny's beatdown. What is this saying exactly? Continuing with the story, Dawn walks into the chiaroscuro, which describes an art style in which the contrast of light and shadow is the highlight. Contrast? I know I'm making light of it, but this is really good theming and I love the tie-ins. The chiaroscuro is a themed area in which there are lots of tree cutouts and benches waiting for people to watch what is essentially a shadow puppet show. This makes a great stage for Dawn to intervene and assist in the hunt for the princess, which ends up being her. I guess Johnny just planned on vamping till the end of the show, and he has no clue why or how the princess appeared. He tells the story of a king who tries to marry his daughter to a talentless knight. Dawn takes part in the story, dodging obstacles, remaining wary of shadows which now prove to be real threats as she traverses the second dimension. She runs through a forest, then tricks an ogre to knock itself out and free the knight. Next, she travels through a cave until she comes to a pit of spikes. Johnny asks Dee Dee what Dawn should do next, and she makes a Mary Poppins reference. Going along with Dee Dee, Dawn somehow leaves the screen and manifests an umbrella to use. She floats gently down into the recesses of the cave, defeats the spider, then releases the knight. The third and final adventure has Dawn defeating a dragon, rescuing the knight, and living happily ever after. I have to say that, although it's clever and neat in terms of story and presentation, there are a lot of holes to fill here. Was the show a one-time performance? Will Johnny find the real princess doll later on? How did Dawn manage to manifest an umbrella? Also, the jumping mechanics for some of the segments are really touchy. It could just be a skill issue on my part, however. Thankfully, this is the second of 3 attractions fixed, leaving only one event to save in order to protect Johnny from the gangsters. You can do these events in any order, and I saved my favorite for last. Running down to the beach, we see an endless void of ocean, a gargantuan moon, and a large beached ship attraction. I had to run back for a moment when I saw this bike. If you've ever tried riding a bike in the sand, you know the struggle. My sister and I used to ride bikes to a dried creek bed, and we would always give up and start walking them about as soon as we got there. Over here we see a guy testing his strength, which helps Dawn reach a luminary. I couldn't help but notice these balloons were very colorful against the muted tones of the rest of the game. They remind me of those cakes your family used to get at Walmart with the plastic balloons. Popcorn. It looks like it's popping out and filling these chests. Another one of Johnny's cheap shortcuts. In actuality though, this boat had to have been a massive undertaking. It makes sense that there was a time skip in the middle of the story, because who knows how long this took to build. What we do know is that, although its external appearance is quite imposing and alluring, the interior mechanics are apparently broken. The theming here is really cool. I love the seabirds flying in the sky, the blue choppy waters, and the big fish floating beneath the boat. Nautical nonsense be something I wish. I think Vincenzo was more than exaggerative when he said the place was a disaster. If I saw this as a kid, I'd be super excited. However, as with all of Johnny's plans, nothing works perfectly, so it's up to us to fix it. As we board the ship, Dawn makes use of her incredible strength to lift these heavy boxes and set them on platforms. Whoever's idea it was to control doors this way, why? Although I do really enjoy the spinning of the wheel to create platforms to move with. It even slows back to a stop if you wait long enough. After all, the cool shadow physics are pretty much the focus of the game. After all the boxes are in place, we ride a cart with Dee Dee into the next room, landing right in the middle of a whirlpool. Dee Dee must have read lots of nautical books because she throws out these phrases like she has a weathered spine copy of Moby Dick.
Captain on the deck! Avast there, first mate! Anchors away! Let's heave ho! And hoist the mainsail!
And I'm here for it. In a very dangerous display, Dawn sets a cannonball to fire through the harbor, which tumbles through the air and into a small room. How this was supposed to mechanically reload is a mystery, and it takes Dawn shadow stepping to make it function once more. When it does, the giant red tentacles of Tortuga are smacked away, allowing the duo to sink into the depths. Finally, we end up in a room where the giant octopus is making its final stand. By this point, I've lost any and all simulated spatial awareness that was set up in the first two rooms of the attraction. Either way, it's pretty satisfying to smack the thing in the eye and watch more chaos unfold. Dee Dee somehow has the intuition to fix the attraction, much like she's been able to overcome other seemingly insurmountable obstacles for a child. With all corrected, the outside of the ride begins to come alive, looking even more interesting than before. We come to another scene of Johnny and Vincenzo conversing. The magician agrees to play the show, still seemingly unaware of who Johnny is, or that he is the adoptive father of Dee Dee, his own daughter. Or about the film reel, I guess. There's a bit of a disconnect here. Either I'm missing something or it just wasn't expressed super clearly. Vincenzo has his own stage apart from the main carnival, being the head act and all. And just nearby this is a large, glass-walled workshop. It clearly stands out as being of higher quality than the surroundings. Also, if this clock is correct, it's 3 AM. This could explain why we don't hear many visitors at the carnival just yet. Maybe it's practicing night before the big opening day. Except, as we see later, there are indeed visitors that come this very night. Maybe it's an oversight, or maybe the nightlife here is just really that good. Also, there was this guy doing the strength challenge, but I wasn't sure if that might have been the larger gangster without his hat. Down the alley, we see a recollection of Kat and Johnny's reunion, which is very bittersweet as the triggering mental image is a gun. Inside Vincenzo's workshop is a very strange solar machine made up of many semi-planetary spheres with the sun in the middle. Dawn uses this to carry a ball up to the balcony, a sort of secret key akin to my old redstone rooms in Minecraft. Once the ball is added to this giant musical ensemble, Dawn's able to use the instruments to cross to a new room. There's a reset station for the solar machine present in the first room, and it's in a very hard to reach area. This is our first hint about Vincenzo's connection to the shadow dimension. Also, I wanted to mention this statue, two female forms on top of a sad male form, possibly connecting to Johnny's issues with Kat and Dee Dee, two people he loves and sometimes feels are better off without him. They are, after all, the driving reasons for all of his current shenanigans. I would say there could be some connection to Vincenzo, but he clearly doesn't care about Kat or Dee Dee really. All in all, he's pretty cold. Throughout his shop are a lot of mechanical marvels, things that were certainly mind-boggling in the 1920s. Many of them have purposes that I could not understand. In all honesty, I think they were created just to be cool visual set pieces, other than things like the Tesla coils and so on. Following her well-arranged shadows, Dawn makes her way into the next room, allowing Dee Dee through as well. Dee Dee comes to Vincenzo's primary study area, and he's not too happy about it. He straight up drops the bomb of never having wanted a child, then making Dee Dee cry. Even this, he can't be sensitive toward, and he recalls how his actions led to Kat crying every week of their relationship. In a small moment of clarity, noting his own indifference, he tried to rectify his actions. He gives Dee Dee 2 tickets to the show, then leads her to the phone to call her mom. Kat comes to get Dee Dee and shows her own ego as well, pointing to her rising fame as an excuse as to why she can't be held responsible for her. This just shows that Kat is even more interested in her own fame than taking care of Dee Dee. The goal of making money to pay for their livelihood has now fallen in the back seat and is simply a silver lining. Dee Dee really can't catch a break. And neither can Johnny, as Vincenzo's stage instruments malfunction, which probably isn't even his fault. Then Kat's mad at him again, the goons arrive and harass him, and there seems to be no way out. Cue Dawn and Dee Dee's final major adventure. They head out to a large lighthouse, suspended on the edge of the world like the College of Winterhold. Each floor of the tower has a puzzle in which Dawn must use shadows to carry boxes around. It's actually very cool that the team was able to come up with more and more unique ways to make use of the shadow mechanics, adding new agency with each level. Once Dawn gets most of the way up the lighthouse, things begin to get a little odd. She comes across a very large sheet of paper stretching the wall. On it are people, members of Vincenzo's family. It seems to track a particular path of who does and doesn't fit some type of criteria. Vincenzo Iliescu has traced his lineage back to a man named Octavian. This person was the apparent first to hold a specific quality that Vincenzo was researching. As the tree narrows to the bottom, we see Didi Malankaya, who took the name of her mother after her parents' divorce. Across the family tree, we see multiple members who had been admitted to asylums, and even one who underwent an exorcism. As Vincenzo seems to maintain a certain quality he was tracking, and believes it may have gone to Didi, a clear picture arises. It seems Vincenzo is in some way connected or more sensitive to the shadow dimension. This would make sense as to how he could traverse his own workshop without any stairs or physical means of travel. Although how the janitor was supposed to clean the second level, I don't know, that's a tough job, man. It also makes sense as to how Didi, his own daughter, would also be sensitive to the second dimension. Up higher, we see images of shadows cast from and upon certain body parts or skeletons, as well as renditions of optical energy transference. Here are pictures that Vincenzo was studying, labeled Pictures Depicting the Shadow Dimension's Effect on the World. This also includes an interesting woman in the top photo that we'll touch on later. Continuing through the lighthouse, we come across another work area filled with booze and schematics. We find another important room with a very familiar woman in a photo beside Vincenzo. She's dressed in the same way as Dawn and has only slightly longer hair. In another image, we see that she's suspended in the air below him as he performs a trick on stage. As Dawn completes the final shadow puzzles, she finds herself ruminating on all that's transpired. For a short story, it seems a bit repetitive to rehash these moments, especially after some have already been remembered in the Luminary puzzles. Still, each one is emotional and impactful to the overall story. For example, this first one is given a second meaning. When Johnny was setting up the shadow puppet show, Didi asked why the king kept trying to give his daughter away. This is a clear connection to Vincenzo's actions and one that Didi was aware of, subconsciously or otherwise. These scenes highlight that neither parent was perfect, none of the three, in fact. Johnny couldn't hold down a regular job and was always coming up with schemes. Kat was too focused on her career to spend quality time with Didi, the admittedly few times it was probably available. And Vincenzo is just a straight up jerk, essentially abandoning his family for stardom in the way Kat may be moving toward, as hinted by that earlier scene. To reach the final level of the tower, Dawn traverses large, floating examples of the family's plight. Suitcases for constant moving, the film reel Dawn had to steal to show Vincenzo's act, the gramophone with Kat's voice that was Didi's only company, the cat statue from outside the Excelsior, and finally, the eviction notice that is an ever-present threat on Kat and Didi's lives. With a final swing of the light, Dawn places a beacon on the stage, allowing Vincenzo to perform his last act. He discusses multiple dimensions stacked upon one another, specifically looking at shadows. He then pulls out a tesseract of some sort and gives examples of different ways its contents could manifest. A monkey-like creature comes out, and the magician transforms him into some sort of roaming bird that is now forever haunting the skies apparently, though we will also touch on that later. Didi finds Kat and Johnny backstage, going to talk to Vincenzo. She brings her lamp, allowing Dawn to see the fruits of her labor. Then, as all seems well and finished, this happens. It really leads to questions of how Didi views everyone in the other world. Has Didi always seen them as shadows and not real physical people? Is this why she always brought a lantern with her, even to well-lit areas? Or is Didi now viewing us, breaking the fourth wall as we are now in yet another dimension, the final one expressed in the story? Honestly, it makes no sense to me, but it's pretty cool regardless. As a final bombshell, we're left with the final line of the story.
After all, you are my daughter.
How'd you do that? I thought only Dawn could do that.
It's been a long time, hasn't it? Thanks for taking care of Didi.
So here's where I give a hot take on Vincenzo. The reason he's been so preoccupied and disinterested in Kat or Didi is because he was trying to rectify a mistake. He spent all this time working on how to get his missing assistant back. Us. Dawn. Is it okay that he left his partner and daughter to fend for themselves while he played shows and made lots of money? No. But perhaps he had fallen in love with Dawn, his assistant, and became so focused and obsessed on saving her from her fate, which he caused through his connection to the shadow dimension, that he simply had time for nothing else. It would explain all those machines he obviously doesn't use in his shows, all the notes in his study, etc. As a final note on the story, many of those who have experienced it, myself included, cannot view that as a simple happy ending. Yes, Didi's parents got back together. Yes, Vincenzo finds Dawn. Yes, the carnival was a success and Johnny's debts are cleared. But in the middle of this are two women. Dawn, who is probably going to be saved from her banishment now and will no longer be able to help Dee Dee in such specific ways. And of course, Dee Dee, who was the other half responsible for any of the success in this story. Although Johnny tried really hard to make all this work, his nature as a screw-up is a true fault that Dee Dee cannot and should not be expected to consistently manage. If there had been a hint of Johnny finding a stable job in the post-credits or something, that would have alleviated this feeling a lot, but there wasn't. Kat is also going to pursue her singing career, now without the stress of gang involvement, but can she ever really be sure? The linchpin of all this potential stability would be Johnny finally cleaning up his act and maintaining a job. Whether he's good of heart or not, it's a difficult world out there, and one in which we simply have to play the cards we're dealt. And isn't that just what everyone did? Next, I'd like to briefly go over the gameplay aspects of Contrast. At its base, the game is a 2D, 3D puzzle adventure. The traversal of shadows is super cool and something I'd never experienced since I never played games like Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds, in which the player also swaps between 2 and 3D environments. Throughout each level, the game leads the player from simple shadow walking and jumping, all the way to shadow phasing and manipulating objects with their own dimensionality. These are very cool set pieces, and it would have been cool to see more. One of the largest complaints about this game was its brevity. However, I feel like the small team which created this game would have run out of steam fairly quickly had they tried to come up with any more puzzle mechanics. Toward the end of the game, carrying boxes this way and that can be a little tedious. With their limited resources, I think an extension of the game may have led to what is essentially a college paper lengthening method of using very descriptive words to create a very full page of many great words which do a great job of describing things in a very descriptive and wonderful way, if you catch my drift. The boost ability was also a little strange. I suppose I don't understand how being an acrobat would give you shadow dash capabilities, but overall, the rule of cool applies and it gives the player something else they can do. Now let's look at luminaries again. It's not required that someone get them all in order to get the collectibles achievement, and each mission only requires 3 to 6 at most to progress. So the inclusion of so many only makes sense as something for players to do. Without them existing as their own optional puzzles, the story would have been an even shorter experience. As someone who had played through the game before, my most recent run-through took 2 hours. This excluded one practice run for refamiliarizing myself, but did include my cinematic shots and all. In total, I believe I've spent more time thinking about the game, reading about it, telling others about it, and listening to its score than I have actually walking through its shadows. Is that a negative thing? Honestly, it's pretty subjective. I don't think I'd be telling you about it today if it didn't leave some kind of impression on me. Now, let's look over the characters in more detail. I think it would be a great idea to start with our playable character, Dawn. Originally mentioned in trailers and such as the imaginary friend, she's soon understood to be Vincenzo's past assistant who somehow got stuck in the second dimension after a show gone wrong. Her design is easily the most striking of those in the game, simultaneously looking like something wild a child would dream up, but also something that makes sense once you understand her origins. She's dressed like a performing acrobat, with the striped pants and colorful orange bodice. Well, as colorful as you can get within this game. Another layer of her visual design is that she ends up looking almost like a grown-up Dee Dee, including a more mature version of her hairstyle, intentionally chosen by the development team to make this connection. Dawn was originally planned to be blonde, wearing a longer scarf and altogether seeming a totally different person. Looking at this admittedly rough early development trailer, we can see how she looked originally. Since we spend all our time playing as Dawn, I'm very glad that they continued to refine her style into something more anachronistic. As far as Dawn's character, there isn't much to say. She's a silent role to be filled by the player, an assistant to Dee Dee, much like she used to assist her biological father in his magic shows. It seems that Dawn somehow found Dee Dee, who was the only person who could probably see her. This is because of the, let's call it, shadow gene that was passed on to Dee Dee. Does Dawn help Dee Dee just because she cares? I doubt she knew about Vincenzo's child before all of this, so I don't think she would have seen it as an opportunity to find him again. Though, unbeknownst to the player, she probably realized her potential chance once he came up within Johnny's carnival plan. This also means that, if Johnny had never tried to make right with his family, Dawn may never have found her way back to our dimension. You know, if she didn't see all the giant Vincenzo posters and just hoped to see him around. Dee Dee is a 9-year-old girl that sees the best in everyone. She always cleans up her parents', namely her father's, mistakes, and is the glue binding the pages of this story. Every action we take is to help Dee Dee in her path toward reuniting her family, as well as to hopefully help ourselves reclaim reality. An interesting detail is that Guillaume Provost, the director of the project and head of Compulsion Games, was a single father at the time of development. He channeled this into the story, trying to see from the perspective of a young girl with separated parents. This was also probably an exercise in understanding his own child/children. I couldn't find out how many he had. Her visual design is heavily based on Ophelia from Pan's Labyrinth, and it's very clear to see. This image here is a clear example, with Ophelia and Dee Dee's hair being very similar, her love of books as evident by the stacks near the window, and the entire room in general. It's dilapidated, and she sits upon a lone bed in the center. Here's another image showing how close the hair design is, though Dee Dee has waves where Ophelia does not. She still has a red shirt though that seems fitting with the styles of the time. Dee Dee was voiced by Teal Bishoprick, who also voiced Sarah Fisher from Splinter Cell Conviction, the only game in that series I've yet to play. Now we move into the less visually dynamic characters. First we have Catherine Malankaya, or Catherine Knight as her pseudonym. Kat is a singer by night hoping to become a star. Throughout the story, she goes from trying to provide, to being angry with Johnny, to being wrapped up in her own potential fame, which is less understandable. Her silhouette is very, exaggerated, but she was based upon Jessica Rabbit, so this makes a lot of sense. There's also the whole femme fatale thing that fits in perfectly with the noir themes. Her singing voice is done by Laura Ellis, a contemporary jazz singer with tons of talent. In fact, her music in the intro is what drew me in initially. It's ghostly in a way, and sets the tone along with the background visuals of the ghost note and the empty street. I haven't seen another game create such a clear setting before I even play. I do wonder if these songs were created specifically for the game, and if Ellis had notes to go off of. Maybe some ghost notes. Kat has an amazing in-game voice actor as well, Vanessa Matsui. She also directed her own show, Ghost BFF, which has a pretty good rating on IMDb if you want to check it out. Kat shows that she can be very independent, often not by choice however. I left the story hoping that she would indeed be happy again with Johnny and Dee Dee, especially with the smile in this picture. Next is Johnny, the dad that couldn't quite figure it out. He always wears a nice suit to present his best. Instead of working regular jobs, he would always try and find some sort of scheme to get out of it. This led to him owing $20,000 to the gangsters, which, adjusting for inflation, would be over $315,000 today. Like I said earlier, I don't know how he achieved that money just from the carnival, especially when every attraction was around 25 cents. We have 14 events that I counted. The hot air balloon ride is $3. It also shows this generic pricing sign, but we'll ignore that. The next priced event is the balloon pop, which is 5 cents a try. Let's say each person tries 3 times, so 15 cents. Next is Spill the Milk, where you get 3 balls to throw for 15 cents. After this is Duck Hunt, where kids shoot for 25 and adults for 35, so let's average at 30. Viewing the Strongman is 5 cents a person, though I don't know how they'd enforce that. Flying Pigs average at 30 cents, and the Clown is 5 cents like the Strongman. The following events do not have a listed price, so I've guesstimated. The Big Top is $2.50 since a lot of stuff can happen there, but you don't get to fly like in the air balloon. The Carousel is 10 cents. The High Dive is 10 cents since it involves danger. Test Your Strength is 15 cents and you get 3 tries. Finally, the Chiaroscuro is $2 and Tortuga's Revenge is $4 since it's a very large and costly attraction. The Amazing Vincenzo's act as the headliner would probably be the most expensive, probably around $5. Let's say this delicious popcorn that is so good I want to become part of it is 3 cents a carton. If everyone ate 1 carton of popcorn and completed every single attraction at least once, it would cost each of them $17.88. That is equivalent to $282.15 today. I know I got a bit liberal with some of the prices, but oh well. It was a time of decadence and confused priorities, after all. With this in mind, it would take 1,119 visitors for Johnny's Carnival to sell what is necessary to break even. This does not include paying the talent, paying the people to perform maintenance on things, even though it's usually Dee Dee and Don, etc. Let's add another $1,000 on top of the balance to cover these costs. This means Johnny needs 1,175 visitors instead. Best of luck to him. Thanks for allowing me to do this obscure math for this obscure game I really like. Moving on. These debts led Johnny to being in big trouble, which eventually did the same for Kat and Dee Dee, so I think Kat was right to distance herself from him until he ironed out these issues. Across the story, I personally think Johnny really did try. It seemed like he just had horrible luck and he failed at every turn. This was, of course, after he did a bunch of scheming to land him in hot water, but no one's perfect. Johnny was voiced by Elias Tufexis, who has done a ton of VA work on games like Starfield, Call of Duty, Death Stranding, Assassin's Creed, and even Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC, which was amazing, where he played the Grand Zealot Brian Richter. I think this character was a very good showing of someone trying their best to right their wrongs, even if they didn't always hit the mark. Though there is one thing I would do differently than Johnny. If it were me running the carnival, it would all just be an elaborate setup so I could get the recipe behind this buttery goodness. Next up is Vincenzo, the character you love to hate. No, really, this guy's a tool most of the time. I'm glad Kat left him and went to Johnny, who at least clearly loves his adopted daughter. Vincenzo also seems very calm about finally meeting Don again. If I were Don, I'd be really mad. at least until Vincenzo revealed his inner soft spot and his obsession with learning about the Shadow Realm so he could get her back. If there was a little more time in the story, I think Vincenzo could have been redeemed. I would have loved to see him apologize to Dawn to explain all that happened. However, I think this would have removed some of the intrigue that allows nerds like me to dive deep into it and theorize about the possibilities. Regardless, his handling of Dee Dee was very poor. The way he drops the bomb about not wanting her was more than awful. She's a 9-year-old child who is always alone and thought, at least initially in the story, that none of them wanted to give her any attention at all. Vincenzo was voiced by Bruce Dinsmore, who is also incredibly talented and was in many things including Alice in Borderland, a 2020 Netflix series in which Teal, the voice actor for Dee Dee, also played a small role. Beyond this cool detail, there's also his role as Binky in Arthur, Sam in The Outer Worlds, various voices in Assassin's Creed, and many more. Not only does he do all these roles, he also does something you won't expect. He played both of the gangster characters, Salvio and Carmine. Listen to this scene and tell me they're the same person.
She was getting pretty loud in there. See? You meet a guy's wife, now he's got a whole new reason to make good. How come you know so much? 'Cause my ma used to smack me every time I didn't know. I should try that with my kids.
That is just wild. There was so much voice talent in this game. These two are the common small and large trope and were used as the brains and the muscle in order to wheel Johnny around. Also, their names were directly lifted from the credits of The Godfather, another neat detail. With that, we close on the characters, their designs, and so on. The visual designers did a fantastic job conveying their personalities, even through the shadows in those 2D animations. If I had to pick a favorite character design, it would of course be Dawn because, come on. As for a favorite character, Dee Dee is the obvious choice, with Johnny being a close second. Before we get into more meta information, I wanted to talk about the world for a moment. It's pretty clear that it has great visuals and noir concepts, but here's a few more details. The world is broken and disjointed a lot of the time, something that causes a lot of questions about what Dee Dee can and can't see. Is this really how the world is, or is it just how those with the shadow gene see it? Also, why is Dawn able to see it? And where did this idea come from? Well, Contrast started as a virtual reality game in which you had to traverse a broken landscape in order to recover memories. This would lead to uncovering the mystery they had originally planned, which, ironically, is now a mystery to us. A big fixture of the world is that it is quite literally Dee Dee's. It was intentionally created to be viewed as an adult through a child's eyes. Consider Dee Dee doing hopscotch. This reminds me of avoiding cracks between tiles as a kid, no matter where I was. Kat has enough baggage as it is, so good on Dee Dee for protecting her back. Looking at the concept art, we see tons of examples of worn down streets, juxtaposed with the more flashy show business areas. There's a clear disconnect between the reality people are actually experiencing and that which they are using for escapism. This would become a heavy focus of Compulsion Games' next title, We Happy Few, which I may do a video on in the future. Perhaps the most unique and interesting piece of the world is the lighthouse. As I've discussed this in detail within the story section, I'll leave it here with the fact that the designers worked very hard, creating so many concepts, including this one where we can see the memories shadowed on the walls. This is just too cool. Before the game released, there were 3 big trailers, each tackling a different angle of the game. The most notable of these to me is the concept trailer. In it, Dee Dee mentions this quote.
This is the night it happened, when she never came home.
This could either have been planned to reference Dawn or Kat, but obviously changed. Next we see the screen in the theater playing a real video. This is really cool, but I think it was a good decision to change it to something more fitting to the game's theme, though it would have been cool for some small video to play before Vincenzo's performance snapshot. Here we see Dawn's first iteration. I have to be honest and give my first rude comment on the game. This is just bad. Granted, this was very early in design from what I can tell, but just, man, I'm glad we got this and not this. Just past this point, we see the monkey shadow creature moving through the background. Was this supposed to be an enemy to fight at some point? We will never know. However, it was still used in Vincenzo's final performance of the game's story, so it didn't go unused. Another interesting thing in this trailer is that Kat is the one who states that she's staying at the Excelsior Hotel, not Johnny. She also had a different room number, that being 605 and not
Room 529, kiddo.
Contrast is a very special game. Is it short? Yes, but I think it was worth the price. See, there's a lot of talent within such a small package. The artists, animators, voice actors, programmers, everyone really pulled together to make such a brilliant product. There are times when the themes are a little too real, maybe even close to home. The voice of Laura Ellis takes these emotions and makes them unavoidable. I wonder if Dee Dee's parents finally recovered and rekindled their damaged bonds. If Vincenzo learned to control his shadow magic to prevent further accidents. Each time I finish the game, I'm left with these thoughts to ponder, and they never really leave me, no matter what I do. Thank you all for watching. I know this isn't Elder Scrolls content, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. This game has had a strong hold on me for over 10 years now, and I just had to tell someone about it, so thanks for lending an ear. More Elder Scrolls content is on the way next, so keep an eye out for it. In the meantime, I want to thank my patrons, Rachel and Rumor Raisin. You guys rock. On my Patreon, I share other details of my life, including things that don't quite fit the channel, such as my mushroom farming antics, pets, drawings, etc. If any of that interests you, feel free to follow the link in the description. I also want to thank the entire Compulsion Games team, the voice actors for the game, and of course, Laura Ellis. With that, it's time to close the curtain. See you all next time.